Christian thinker and cultural apologist, founder and president of the Ezra Institute for Contemporary Christianity. He is adjunct instructor for culture and apologetics at Bryan College, Tennessee. He also served as founding pastor at Westminster Chapel, Toronto for 14 years. Learn more about Dr. Boot's work at EzraInstitute.com.
Good morning. I didn't get the memo about not using paper notes and only using the notes on the screen here, so that's why this had to come up. I'm a bit of a dinosaur when it comes to paper, so I apologize for that. My subject is pronouns, and don't worry, this isn't going to be a lecture on English grammar, but to talk about the ideology now that is undergirding the war on language. Meaning, by the revolutionaries today, is being sought through an inward turn to psychological, sociological, and radically personalized meanings. So instead of objective scientific knowledge of nature being seen as power, as it was in the past, to control nature through scientific knowledge, the recreation of nature is revolutionary power. We've heard already this morning about the critical theorists. These are Marxists who seek to develop ideas, theories that allegedly liberate people from oppression. That's the nature of critical theory. And they believe that the Enlightenment forfeited its realization of freedom through the reason of man by becoming complicit in patriarchal, domineering power relations, an unholy alliance, if you will, with Christian civilization and its confidence in the creation order. So it supposedly discovered the power of reason, but then surrendered its discovery of freedom through reason by this complicity. Two of the great founders of critical theory, the Frankfurt School Marxists, Horkheimer and Adorno, write, "The fault lies in a social context which induces blindness. The mythical scientific respect of peoples for the given reality, which they themselves constantly create, finally becomes itself a positive fact." In other words, man constantly creates his own reality. The problem for the rationalists of the Enlightenment was simply that they had too much respect for this idea of a given reality. The idea of true knowledge rooted in creation then as a given and the need for human conformity to it is dismissed as a form of violent power. It's demonic. The present human situation is therefore reduced to conflicting power relations, and the ultimate source of this blind patriarchal power is God himself, which is reflected overtly in marriage and family structures. Liberation then entails rejection of creation for this structureless freedom of the human personality, and that means releasing all one's erotic urges and releasing unfettered expression. The idol of pure reason is replaced by the practical reason of social justice, deconstructing God's creation order. Now, for the progressives, this order must be abolished by what Marcuse called a great refusal. A great refusal. What is the great refusal? It means rejecting all Western concepts and instead demanding sexual revolution by promoting feminist, queer, lingual revolution. The great refusal to participate in any way in Christian civilization. The inversion of morality and immorality. The great Oxford philosopher Roger Scruton, he's dead now, Sir Roger Scruton, discussed the character of the attack on Christian culture in the West by these critical theorists. He says the left-wing enthusiasm that swept through the institutions of learning in the 1960s was one of the most efficacious intellectual revolutions in recent history and commanded a support among those affected by it that has seldom been matched by any revolution in the world of politics. So it wasn't a violent political uprising, it was an intellectual revolution. More effective, he says, than political revolutions. It was targeted at total social subversion and cultural transformation, and it was justified on this basis. He said it means emancipation from the structures, from the institutions, customs, and conventions that shaped the bourgeois order and which established a shared system of norms and values at the heart of Western society. Much of their literature, that's the leftist literature, is devoted to deconstructing such institutions as the family, the school, law, and the nation state through which the inheritance of Western civilization has been passed down to us. And this was done through fraudulent and unintelligible theories of language, identity, and social order. This was passed off as the key to social renewal. The foundational idea of the revolution is that meaning is no longer something transcendent. It's not something that transcends human signification, language, or culturally conditioned perceptions. So you don't look for objective meaning as such in the use of their language. That would presuppose a pre-established givenness again in creation. No, meaning is simply the chosen use of language. It's the manipulation of language to realize a structure. The meaning is the use. There is no longer a logocentrism in language that refers to existing states of affairs. Language is a tool to subvert meaning. The idea that, for example, gender is something ontologically real, that's a Christian conspiracy. So by the conjuring of the revolutionaries, language spells are invoked to alter social reality. Language spells. LGBTQ2SIA++, the alphabet soup of the modern queer theorists, is part of this. At the center of this struggle over the use of pronouns is the central aspect of this artifice, this subterfuge to remake the world. Zer, ze, they, them, and so on. These are language spells to alter social reality. Roger Scruton, again, called this assault on meaning the nonsense machine. The nonsense machine, which I particularly like. By a linguistic emancipation from accountability to the real world, you very easily eliminate real argument and reasoned engagement, and everything becomes about shouting and power politics. He says there is no need to ask what the revolution means or what you might achieve by means of it. Nothing means anything. And that is the revolution, namely the machine to annihilate meaning. So if you're struggling with what ze, zer, them, they, and all of that really means, you've already got it. The purpose is the annihilation of meaning. One of the influential users of the nonsense machine is the critical theorist Judith Butler, an American lesbian leading radical feminist, taught a whole generation of social theorists to regard the binary distinction of man and woman to be a mythical creation of language repetition. What ordinary mortals generally believe to be a real physical, biotic, and logical direct perception is just sophisticated illusion generated by language. Butler says this: there is no reason to divide up human bodies into male and female sexes, except that such a division suits the economic needs of heterosexuality and lends a naturalistic gloss to the institution of heterosexuality. A lesbian transcends the binary opposition between woman and man. A lesbian is neither a woman nor a man. But further, a lesbian has no sex. She is beyond the categories of sex. One is not born female, one becomes female. But even more radically, one can, if one chooses, become neither male nor female, woman nor man. Sounds like gibberish. It's sophisticated academic gibberish. The only reason, she says, that culture recognizes a distinction between male and female is because it suits the capitalist desires of heterosexual men, i.e., the Christian concept of the family, the biblical idea of private property, and it pretends to a male-female distinction, denying the givenness of creation, which is, in fact, simply an illusion. This fanatical argument essentially holds that the linguistic use of the terms man or male and female and woman is productive of a culture that privileges heterosexuality in marriage, which is oppression. The term female should not need to imply, they claim, the opposite of male and vice versa. So the pronouns farce in Western society is an expression of the philosophical construct of gender fluidity. But we have to go a little bit further and note that on this view, sex is reduced to a political and cultural interpretation of the body. Human body parts are just a discontinuous set of attributes upon which the language of sex imposes an artificial unity. The artificial unity then becomes a language regime forming people's perceptions and forcibly shaping the interrelationships through which our bodies are perceived. So Butler actually seriously asked, is there a physical body prior to the perceptually perceived body? An impossible question to decide. Is there a real male and female body prior to what is created by language and therefore our perceptions? The body then is just a perception formed by linguistic signs, and so the naming of normative sex is an act of oppression and domination that has to be subverted for people to be free. That's classic critical theory. Now, this lingual nonsense machine obviously holds there is no creation order. Whatever a human being is, and they can't tell us, language makes reality. Words are magic. It's literally say the magic words. A number of social theorists took the memorable phrase from a playwright, Antonin Artaud, his body without organs. And they deployed it to interpret the body as a biological receptacle in which the self-creating intellect is contained. So your body is just a receptacle containing your intellect from which you forge your own identity. This creative intellect takes the dust of your ego's desires, the idol of an abstracted, organless body, and breathes life into it by a linguistic incantation. It is a parody of creation, but it's self-creation. The task culturally and politically is therefore obvious to these activists. Butler says it is to overthrow the entire discourse on sex, indeed to overthrow the very grammar that institutes gender or fictive sex as an essential attribute of humans and objects alike, which is a problem for the French, for example, because in some languages, gender is embedded in all kinds of objects. War must be waged against the repetition of words like man and woman, husband and wife, male and female, him, her, he and she. These are oppressive, rigid codes, thank you, let there be light, of hierarchical binarisms. Hierarchical binarisms. These must be displaced by a new lexicon, and only then may we continue the march towards the vanishing horizon of social justice. So Butler predicted 30 years ago, this is what she said, the loss of gender norms would have the effect of proliferating gender configurations. That's like 72 genders today, right? Destabilizing substantive identity and depriving the naturalizing narratives of compulsory heterosexuality and their central protagonists, man and woman. And by the way, the almost impenetrable use of obscure language is part of the mystique that these academics are aiming at. Butler realized this could only be accomplished to get rid of, basically she's just saying, we have to get rid of man and woman, and we do this by changing the language. And she realized this could only be accomplished by extending the idea of the political to include things not traditionally thought of as political, because she saw that politics is that which regulates, establishes, and deregulates her idea of identity. So the politicization of life corresponds to the statist religion of our age. An ontology of human identity, that's something given with creation, is no longer regarded as a foundation. It is a political creation. Now, Sir Roger Scruton recognized this problem of language spells in literature, and I would say actually that this is merely a secularized form, a sort of academic form of occultism. This is what we're actually dealing with. It's occultism, but it's dressed up in academic language. Reality will alter to service human desires if you use the right new magic words and you repeat them, and then you enforce their repetition through the law. Scruton says this: the resulting nonsense, although it cannot be easily deciphered intellectually, can be deciphered politically. It is directed nonsense, and it's directed at the enemy. We are to discard the old hierarchies, the binary structures, the trees of the bourgeois family, and the capitalist machine, and reform ourselves as grassroots communities of underground activists. The assault is aimed primarily at the language through which the enemy lays claim to the world, the enemy being creation order and ultimately God. Critical theory, then, is more than an academic or social tool. It is a total world and life view, a religious cult with a vision of creation, self-creation, of sin, which is to be associated with the oppressive hierarchy, the patriarchy, justice, which, as we've heard, is social justice, and salvation, which is liberation from God's order. That's salvation. The life and death struggle against this demonic worldview infiltrating the church is one of the great battles of our time. Power from below against power from above. But let me close by simply saying this: Jesus Christ is King, and his creation order cannot be overturned. It doesn't matter how much you try, it cannot be overturned. Already we are seeing this edifice beginning to crumble, and God's judgment and his creation order is biting back. So I put it to you, our task is to resist, to refuse, a new refusal, to refuse to participate in the lie, to refuse to falsify language, for in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and his Word is the source of all definition. Thank you.